This video is brought to you by OpenVPP and Ionna. OpenVPP, a global virtual power plant for electric vehicles. See vehicles charging across the world and zoom in to see real-time charging status in what aims to be the world's largest vehicle virtual power plant. OpenVPP allows you to track charging history, energy usage, and daily trips, comparing your usage versus others, day to day and month to month. With OpenVPP, we're working together to showcase the potential of EV charging to electric grid operators. There may even be future coordinated EV charging rewards coming soon. So sign up today at world.openvpp.energy. It's completely free to join and takes under 60 seconds. And Ionna, the EV charging network brought to you by the world's leading automakers. Ionna is raising the bar on what it means to charge. We're talking a 400 kilowatt minimum nationwide network built with the customer in mind. Fast, reliable, affordable, every single time. Hello and welcome to another Out of Spec Reviews video, and welcome to another chat between me and you. This is a podcast style video all about the Rivian R2 and its competitive segment. So that really means the Rivian R2 versus Tesla Model Y versus BMW iX3 versus Volvo EX60 versus Mercedes GLC 400 electric. And I'm lucky enough to have spent time with all of these vehicles, and in this video, I'm going to share my thoughts on all of them. We'll break it down into roughly 10 categories, and we'll at least speculate as to how the R2 will stack up against those vehicles. The good news is we're going to learn even more about the R2 very soon because their first drive reviews are launching just shortly after this video. So you're going to be able to tune in to some of your favorite YouTube channels and websites and learn about how this car drives. I'm really looking forward to that because that will really help decide and shape a lot of what we're going to be talking about in this video in terms of the subjective feel of the vehicle, the ride quality. I have no idea how that's going to be. I'm so excited to see that. But at the end of the day, we should really quantify the specs, how the R2 stacks up against much of its competition, because charging and range and space and warranty and technology and driver assistance, all of these things really matter. And I want you to have a clear picture before you go in and watch all of the R2 reviews that are going to be coming up so that you can know exactly how that car stacks up against some fantastic vehicles it's going up against. So join me as I share my thoughts on the mid-size, premium-ish crossover electric thing in this episode. So, the Rivian R2, why so much excitement around this vehicle? Well, I think it's building. We're going to see so much news and information about the R2 here over the next few days and weeks and months as we learn all about this vehicle, and I cannot wait. This is truly the most important vehicle of the year for Out of Spec to cover, and we'll be doing everything we can to bring all the news and information and reviews to you guys as quickly as possible. And before all of those reviews and news come from some of your favorite content creators and websites that you'll be seeing this week, I think it's important to quantify how the R2 stacks up against some of the severe competition, let's just say. The traditional automakers, many of them have woken up and come up with these amazing platforms that are high power charging, great driving dynamics, and a great value in this small SUV segment. And of course, you've got the big dog in the room, the Tesla Model Y, that just seems to outsell everything all the time. And for good reason. The Model Y is a fantastic vehicle. But we've never really had a great lower cost, or at least in the same price range of Model Y, alternative. The Model Y pretty much wins every single comparison test we've ever put it into, and that's because it is truly a great car. But so many people are looking for an alternative choice to that very high selling vehicle. And so I think that's where a lot of the R2 excitement comes from. The R1 is an aspirational vehicle, but it's not pretentious. It's a premium product that has a spirit of adventure with extreme capability to back up that adventurous marketing. I mean, I've done so much off-roading in my R1T, and it's just been amazing from a suspension standpoint and powertrain. It's just such a capable vehicle. And that's to say it's not just capable off-road, it's comfortable on the road, and it tows well, and it can rip it around the track, which we've done many times on camera together. And I think everyone's really hoping for that same R1 experience distilled down into, yeah, we know we're going to lose some capability, but a lower cost, more adventurous version of like a Tesla Model Y, where you don't have to go to a dealership to purchase a car. It's direct sales and, good warranty, cool brand, great image. That's what a lot of people are looking for. So in this video, we're going to break it down into basically 10 categories of the R2 versus the Model Y on sort of the lower cost side, but then also the iX3, GLC, and EX60. So one thing I want to mention is the R2 is just a tiny bit shorter than the iX3. They're within like 2.5 inches of each other or so. So they're all in that same size category. And it's so funny because I was just looking at some of our early videos on R2 that I've had a chance to film on this channel. I'll leave my full tour linked below, by the way. And it just felt smaller than the other vehicles, but it's really not by that much. I guess I'm just used to R1S being so big that it made the R2 feel kind of small, especially when you park it next to R1S. But anyway, that's that. And of course, it's a Kyle video. You're going to get my rambling and rants. And of course, all of this information is available online if you don't want to deal with me talking about it for so long. But the first thing I really want to talk about is the price and value for each of these vehicles, because I think that is going to be the primary driver for the R2. There is almost no scenario in which that I see the R2 being measurably better than the R1. So if price wasn't a factor for you, you would have already gone out and bought the R1 because that's the more premium Halo product with extreme capability. The thing is, Rivian's only mentioned $45,000 starting MSRP for the R2. Now, I think that's going to be small battery rear-wheel drive. We don't know what drivetrain configurations are going to be at the time of this recording. We don't know what battery packs are going to be on offer. But if I had to guess, there's going to be a total of 3 drivetrains and 2 batteries. That is what makes sense to me. I think you're going to have a standard battery, which is going to be around, if I had to guess, 80 kilowatt hours or so, 75 to 80 kilowatt hours. And then you'll have a large battery that's going to be 95 to 100 kilowatt hours, if I had to guess. Again, just spitballing. I don't have a lot of the information. This is a lot of what we're going to learn about over the next few days. That big battery is going to be quite expensive. Rivian has had a history of charging a lot of money for battery upgrades, and in many cases, many of them are not worth it. When Rivian first introduced the Max Pack, it was like an $11,000 upcharge for 10 kilowatt hours difference, plus or minus. I don't remember the exact numbers, but it was something like $1,000 per kilowatt hour is what they were charging on an upcharge to go from large to max. So Rivian already has a history of charging way too much for battery upgrades, and let's just keep our fingers crossed that they don't do that for the R2. So those are the 2 batteries. They're both probably going to be that 4695 cell form factor, which is or maybe it's 4690. Anyway, it's a big fat can. iX3 is 4695. And so it's not unusual in the marketplace now to see these big can form factors for the cells, but probably NMC chemistry. I don't think we're going to see R2 launching with LFP, and that's a good thing because their R1 LFP tuning was terrible and actually caused me to pretty much sell my R1S LFP because it was such a bad job of battery management tuning. And that's what I'm hoping is all dialed in with the R2. All the teething problems, all the annoyances we dealt with on the R1, I just want to see this have a rock solid start with great reliability and a dialed in form factor. They cannot afford the mess ups that they had with R1 with this new high volume product. So I mentioned the 2 battery packs. That small battery, large battery would be my guess. And then 3 motor configurations, a rear wheel drive, single motor. Rivian has really strong driving dynamics teams. They're not going to make this thing a front wheel drive vehicle. If I had to guess, it's going to be a rear primary axle product. And I think that's going to be one of the most fun versions to have and slide around, but also the most efficient. Obviously, if you just have a single motor, it'll be really great for efficiency. Then they're going to probably offer a dual motor version, and that's probably what's going to come at launch if I had to guess. This could be an induction motor on the secondary axle and a primary axle being a permanent magnet motor, but if I had to guess, it's probably going to be dual permanent magnet motor, maybe with a clutch disconnect. We really have to see how Rivian implements this dual motor setup. We can talk about it when we get to the range, but if I had the choice, I would do an induction motor up front and a permanent magnet motor in the rear, so you don't have the flux-related losses on the front axle, but then you don't also have to deal with the annoyances of a clutch disconnect while driving, because Rivian has a dynamic clutch disconnect in their current vehicles, and it's terrible. It's so frustrating. And so again, I hope they avoid all of that annoyance with the R2. They've learned their lessons. They cannot tune a good dynamic disconnect, and they just need to eliminate that from the R2. And then the third, for that dual motor, I should mention, there's probably going to be a standard output configuration and a performance output configuration that's just dictated by software. Both of those would ultimately lead to the same EPA rated range. It's just when you mash the accelerator pedal, you'll have the software unlock. That's just, again, spitballing and a guess based off of what they've done with R1. Then there's the rumor of the tri-motor top spec version. Rivian's promised that this vehicle will go 0 to 60 in under 3 seconds with their top spec powertrain, and that's probably going to be a tri-motor version. We know that they've been working on it. Whether or not they'll launch with it is a question, and whether or not it comes out at all is also a question. So when I mentioned the starting price at $45,000, I think we can pretty much assume that's going to be small battery rear-wheel drive, and it's probably going to be $55,000, $60,000, $65,000 for the initial launch version that we're all going to have available to us. Now, I am strongly considering buying one of the first ones. I have a very early reservation, and being an existing Rivian owner gets us right up to the top of the list, and I will be running it through all of the tests and stuff. But a lot of it rides on your interest versus the competitive set that we're going to get into. The Tesla Model Y is cheaper, starting at $39,000, but keep in mind that's for the standard rear-wheel drive version. It's really like $45,000 for like a nice Model Y rear drive. You're like $48,000 for a Model Y all-wheel drive with the big battery. I don't think the R2 is going to have that big battery all-wheel drive for less than $50,000, and I really hope they get it there, but the Model Y is still going to be the lesser cost option. On the higher end side, the BMW iX3 is going to be long-range all-wheel drive for $60,000, which is probably closer to where the launch spec of the R2 will come, and that's going to be a 112.2 kilowatt hour vehicle, well over 400 mile of EPA range with all of the new centralized compute and great stuff BMW is doing. I reviewed the BMW iX3. I'll leave that video down below, and that car crushes. I think the real competition for the R2 is the iX3. And I know a lot of people are sold on R2 just because of styling and image and vibe. But if they really sit back and think about what they need in a vehicle, the iX3, I was blown away with that car. It was so cool. And then the Mercedes GLC EV, we don't have final statistics on this, of course, but we're guessing around $65,000 starting price. That's just a more expensive vehicle. It's reasonably okay on the specs, 320 kilowatt charging, 95-ish kilowatt hour pack. We'll get into all of that, but it's nowhere near as impressive as iX3, at least on paper. And I think the styling's okay, but that's really more for like a Mercedes customer wanting a Mercedes EV. I really think the iX3 and the R2 are both going to get a ton of conquest sales from Tesla owners and new EV drivers. And same with the Volvo EX60. The Volvo EX60 is going to start in its single motor rear drive configuration with a low 80 kilowatt hour pack, if I remember correctly, for about $55,000 if I had to guess. $60,000 gives you the mid-range all-wheel drive. That's going to be 90-ish kilowatt hour battery pack, 370 kilowatt charging. I mean, we're talking 10 to 80 in 15 minutes. List goes on and on. EX60, unbelievable how good of a job Volvo did. And for a bit more money, they'll give you a 112 kilowatt hour pack that matches the BMW iX3. Pretty crazy how, it's sort of like BMW and Volvo top dog. Then you have R2 and GLC as sort of mid-spec, R2 maybe even a little worse on the specs, and then the Model Y probably the lowest on paper in terms of impressive specifications. But the Model Y makes up for it with insane efficiency that we'll get to. So pricing-wise, they're all in the region. Model Y is going to be the least expensive, and then I have no idea how the R2 will stack up to the others, but it's going to be really, really interesting. I want to talk about range and efficiency really quick, and then we'll get into charging performance. I just want to mention really quick that a lot of my reviews, a lot of my testing centers around charging performance and ultimate range. Now, I do a lot of testing, and Wes runs our testing channel, but we do a lot of testing to the vehicle's maximum capabilities. Not to say always you should buy or shouldn't buy this vehicle. It's just to say, okay, if you buy an R2, You have to understand that's probably and 99% going to be a low voltage 400 volt-ish architecture, which means you're really not going to see much more than 220 kilowatt charging, very similar to the R1 product line. And, the iX3 is going to just charge twice as fast, pretty much. That's not to say you need to buy one over the other. Most people just charge at home. Most people aren't driving on road trips all the time. But it's just nice when you go to a charging station to know that you can top up really quickly. I guess the two scenarios where range and charging really become a factor before we get into this is if you don't have home charging available to you and you have to rely on fast charging, you want to charge up as quickly as possible on your daily charge. And there's a surprisingly high number of people in this price category, in this sort of buyers demographics that are going to be looking at these vehicles that do not own homes or have no way to charge the vehicle on a daily basis. That is a real consideration when you're thinking about the high voltage cars versus the Rivian. Tesla charges fast, but they up the current on their superchargers to go in. And even then Model Y is just a lame charging curve. So I'd put Model Y and Rivian probably very similar in charging performance if I had to guess. It's not all about the peak. It's about the area under the curve. And we're seeing the 400 volt cars versus the 800 volt cars, and it's a massive difference. Not necessarily because of the voltage, actually, but because of the cell choice that the automaker put in there. I'll do another video on that clarifying. This one's already going to be too long. When it comes to range, keep in mind this is your 100 to 0% EPA rated range that we are guessing for a lot of these vehicles. Many of these vehicles have not been EPA range rated yet, and therefore we just don't know. But EPA range is each automaker games the system a little bit differently, has different key up settings to try and eke out a bit more advertised range, but you may not feel that in the real world. One thing you have to know is for the most normal daily commuting, any one of these cars is going to have more than enough daily range for you, even considering if the automaker recommends an 80% daily charging limit. Nothing to worry about here. They're all going to be similar. Yeah, the iX3 and the EX60 are probably going to go a bit farther, but at the end of the day, they're all going to have enough range. So let's talk about that. The Tesla Model Y is the known quantity. It has a 300 and almost 60 mile EPA range rating, 357 in its dual motor, or is that the rear drive configuration? 321 miles for its rear wheel drive standard range. Ultimately, we know that car doesn't really hit those numbers on the highway at 70 at sea level, but it's going to be a 300 mile range vehicle in any of the big battery Model Ys. And that's just fine for most people. I really never hear Model Y owners complaining about their range whatsoever. When it comes to the R2, we just don't know. We're thinking it's going to be EPA range rated on the big battery rear drive at around 330 miles. We don't know what to expect for efficiency on this car, but I'm not expecting great things. It's certainly going to be better than R1. It has to be better than R1, but it's still got a pretty flat frontal area. There's some magic that Rivian can do to eliminate some losses from the drive units, but they already did a lot of that when they went to their Enduro drive system in the R1. So I'm not sure how much there's room for efficiency gains in R2, and I can't wait to run it in our highway range test. Yes, versus R1, but also versus the rest of its competitive segment, so we can see how it stacks up. I think the standard range R2 is not going to be 300 miles. I think that's going to be a 260, 270 mile range vehicle, and then the dual motor is probably going to be right at around 300, and then the single motor big battery is going to be probably 330, if I had to guess. I don't think we're seeing close to 400 miles of EPA range on R2 versus the vehicles like iX3 and EX60 that we definitely are, not because they're more efficient, but they just put a bigger battery in them. 112 kilowatt hours usable in both of those vehicles in their top spec. That's just huge batteries in a relatively small-ish compact SUV. That seems to be the theme. The Mercedes has a bit smaller of a battery, very similar to the R2's large battery, if I had to guess, 95 kilowatt hours usable or so, and that we don't know how far we'll go. This chart's showing 376 miles, but that's based off WLTP. I would guess 310, 300-ish in the EPA cycle. So range-wise, yeah, they all are going to be about the same. The Model Y is for sure going to be the most efficient, followed probably by who knows? Could be anything. The GLC is going to have a 2-speed on the rear axle, so it's just going to be all in that middle of the pack efficiency SUV category. But Model Y is magic, and it looks that way because it's an egg. So, all right, continuing. Charging speed. This is where the Rivian, I think, really gets hurt compared to its more expensive competitors. Rivian R2 will charge probably at 200 to 220 kilowatts. That's going to be 500 amps at around 400 to 450 volts. Now, the voltage of the battery pack is dictated chemically by the cell. It's essentially the way that they have them wired in a series and parallel configuration is up to the automaker and the rest of the entire system. And we've heard many times from RJ and Rivian that the smaller you go, the less you really need high voltage. And I actually totally agree with that, by the way. I'm not Mr. 800 volt all the time. I think a 400 volt car, if tuned properly, can be really good and really great to live with. It really comes down to you're limiting yourself due to the charging infrastructure's amperage output. Most chargers will not output more than 500 amps. The majority of the newer ones won't output more than 600 amps. And therefore, you're really limited to 200 to 220 kilowatts on a 400 volt system architecture. And there's just nothing you can do about that. What Rivian could do is they could engineer the cell's charging curve, a little bit to do with the thermals. I hear a lot of people like really overemphasizing thermals having to do with a curve. It really has to do with more of a power dense cell or an energy dense cell. Yes, thermals play a factor, but that's not the main dictator of a good or bad charging curve. It has to do with the actual copper content in the cell versus active material and what type of active material, and the list goes on and on. But Rivian has to choose that balance of we need to get as much energy capacity in the battery as possible, but then also have as much driving distance as possible. And it's always that balance of finding good energy versus power density. If Rivian went for a reasonably power dense cell, I would love to see this hold 220 kilowatt charging, their maximum performance, all the way to about 75 to 80% state of charge. It's 2026. It's time to see some improvements from charging. So if you're not going to give us a big peak, at least let us have a nice flat curve that can just hold good charging really deep in the battery pack. If that's not the option, let's hope it's not as bad as Tesla, because Tesla will peak at 250 kilowatts on the Model Y pack, whether it's the LG or the Panasonic pack, but it hits it down low and then it just hits max cell limits and hits the floor. And by the time you're crossing 50% state of charge, you're at 1 to 1.25 C if you're lucky. Model Y is a very poor charging vehicle, but it looks pretty good because it shows 250 kilowatts. The problem or the benefit with the Model Y is it's got the efficiency. So the amount of distance you can go for the time that you're plugged into the charger, it's actually pretty good, but you've got to road trip it the Tesla way. Arrive to the charger at 0%, plug it in down low, let it rip, and then just unplug enough to get to the next charger. I think a lot of customers really appreciate flat charging curves more than the big cell limit peaks that maybe I'm more okay with, but I think people just want to have it ride. And so I hope Rivian can just make this a real beefy curve with no major peaks. They're not going to have it at 400 volts, but a lot of area under the curve. iX3 is the highest charging power vehicle here, and it will hit 400 kilowatt peak. Now that's going to be down low, but it's also going to hold it pretty deep. I've seen the charging curves on the vehicle, and it's impressive. The iX3 is going to get down to around 200, 220 kilowatts, somewhere in that 50 to 65% region to match up with the Rivian. And yes, it's going to have a slightly larger pack, but just having that 800 volt system architecture means for amperage limited chargers, you just get so much more power into the vehicle. So from a road tripping perspective or a daily charging perspective, having those quick 10-minute top-ups in the iX3 is going to be more like a 20 to 25-minute top-up in the R2. And, maybe it's worth making a buying decision on that for you. Maybe it's not. But I still think it would be cool if Rivian could deliver the most rugged-looking premium small SUV, but then also be a charging monster. Like, why not do both? I see a lot of arguments online as to why people don't want fast charging, but what I think they really mean is the fast charging doesn't matter to them so much. They would just it's just not making a buying decision on it. If their car had faster charging, they would be happier because then it gives you the option to let your family out at the charging stop for 30 minutes. And guess what? Your car's done. You can leave whenever you want. You're never dictated by the amount of time that the car takes to charge. GLC, also a high voltage vehicle, 320 kilowatt charging, going to be really good. I think a beefy curve on that one. I do worry about the thermals on the GLC based off CLA testing. And then EX60 is a monster. EX60's 370 kilowatt charging, 10 to 80% in under 15 minutes on the P10 version, which is the one most equivalent to the R2. So while the R2 might be 30 to 40 minutes in the 10 to 80% charging window, the EX60 is going to be under 15 minutes. We're getting into major measuremental, is that a word? Major differences between these vehicles in terms of the charging performance. Tesla Model Y is right around 30 minutes. R2 is probably going to be 30 to 35 minutes. Just depends on how they tune that curve. I will certainly let you know as soon as I can. And then the iX3, EX60, and GLC are all going to be 20 minutes or less. Unbelievable that we're starting to see these major charging performance differences. It's really heating up there for sure. I should mention all of those vehicles will have NACS ports for DC charging as well. Rivian R2 comes with a native NACS inlet port, probably going to have a 48 amp onboard charger for AC charging. And that's kind of the case across the board, except for the EX60 that comes standard with 80 amp, 19.2 kilowatt charging. Oh, and maybe iX3 also comes with like a weird 15 kilowatt, 64 amp onboard charger. We have to wait to see a US spec one of those. All right, so the next thing, and the thing that I'm most excited about launching over the next few days of video outputs from many other outlets is going to be the performance and driving dynamics. How will these vehicles drive? And by the numbers, we have a claimed promised 0 to 60 on the Rivian of being the fastest. They say under 3 seconds, 0 to 60. Again, I don't think that's going to be on the launch dual motor configuration. It's probably going to be on a tri-motor configuration that comes out later, just like LiDAR comes out later. But we don't know for sure. So at least based off of all of the speculation, the Rivian under 3 seconds, 0 to 60, going to be the fastest. The next would be the Volvo EX60. Volvo lit this thing up with 670 horsepower in the P12 version. It's going to be a rocket ship in a Volvo. And that's 3.9 seconds 0 to 60 in the P12 configuration. I should mention the Model Y performance, actually, if we can bring that up. I was really thinking Model Y all-wheel drive, which is like mid 4, 4.5, 4.6, 0 to 60. Model Y performance 3.7, pretty good. Nowhere near Rivian at under 3. Mercedes GLC 4.4 seconds, iX3 4.2 seconds. I drove the iX3 and it felt pretty lackluster in acceleration. That's their long-range all-wheel drive cruiser. There will be spicier versions of that BMW coming, for sure. We already know M Division's working on things like that with that platform. But I think Rivian has a real opportunity to make this an acceleration beast for low cost. That's something Tesla always used to do, and it really sold them a lot of cars. It was the test drive experience. Go into the showroom, you don't have much time to figure out the car, just punch it. Whoa! I got to have that. And a lot of people just bought electric cars because of the crazy acceleration. When you don't have time to absorb all the crazy information, you got to make the sale on the dealership lot, or in this case, the showroom lot. I think having a fast car really helps with that. There's certainly no downside, in my opinion, to having a faster accelerating car, but that's a one-sided view. Regardless, all of these vehicles are going to be more than adequate in their acceleration. They're all going to get up to speed for daily driving better than anyone thinks. And that is not the most important part of driving. And neither is, can you drift it? What's the track performance like? How's the real on-limit handling, which I will certainly do all of those reviews on all of those cars out on track because I'm interested in that. This is really like the electric RAV4 and CRV space. They kind of just need to drive better than a Model Y, and it needs to drive better than the RAV4 equivalent. These are vehicles that are not going to be purchased based off of driving behavior. Unless they do something weird or wrong, that would be a reason someone may not want to purchase one. Here's my concern for the R2. The R1S does not drive well on the road. The R1T drives unbelievably well. But I get out of my Gen 1 early R1T and into our new R1S, and it's a night and day difference. That R1S is nervous, it's porpoising, it's doing all this weird body motions and weird inputs, and my R1T is just relaxed and nice and slows down all the movements and just feels properly engineered. I hope more R1T tuning made its way into the R2 than the R1S tuning. I hope it's settled down and relaxed and a nice, comfortable car with a sporting edge. Perhaps they've gone with an adaptive damper or at least frequency response damper. We know this vehicle does not have air suspension, is on coil suspension. It has metal sway bars, no hydraulic linkages like the R1s have. It's very decontented from a chassis perspective. And I just hope they struck a nice balance of most people are going to be daily driving this car to the shop, to school, to whatever. They're not going to be off-roading it a ton or driving it in a performance way a ton. It just needs to hold its own when you get it on a twisty road, but ultimately it needs to be comfortable. And I think that's my expectation. I think they're going to nail it. The Rivian guys, there's so many people inside of Rivian that are car enthusiasts and own some amazing cars and have worked at amazing companies and know what they need to do. So there's so much talent there that I think they probably got the R2 dialed in. If it's anything like R1T, and that team, whoever did that, really should just do the R2. That's a great car. Now let's talk about iX3. iX3 was a real shocker for me. That is no frequency response damper and no air suspension, no crazy sway bars. That is just metal springs and bars. There is no fancy or electronic suspension trickery or chassis trickery going on. No rear steer, nothing like that. And it drove amazing. Really nice. Just a natural, honest feeling car. If Rivian can get anywhere close to how the iX3 was tuned and calibrated, they will have a home run. It was soft. It was nice. It handled very well. And you can all watch that in my iX3 review. That's going to be the real competitor in driving dynamics here because that car drove substantial and premium, but also had a very cost effective suspension and chassis system. The Mercedes is going to probably be the most complicated on the other side of that. It's going to offer air suspension, rear axle steering, 2-speed transmission. That's going to like all play around with how everything is dialed in. I'm kind of worried with how the Mercedes is tuned, but we know how Mercedes drive. They're going to be a little porpoisey, a little soft, a little lax, more comfort oriented, soft brake pedals, very uninspiring drive. But that's what their customers are looking for. And that would be great, honestly, for that car if it drove relaxed. And then the Volvo strikes a nice happy medium, I would imagine. The Volvo is probably going to feel a bit eager because if you remember EX30, that was a fun little hot hatch. I think the EX60 is going to have a little bit more fun character, but also offer air suspension and higher ride height in the cross-country version. That's going to be really nice. And so I expect the Volvo to be kind of almost the perfect blend of all of those cars, if I had to guess. Probably not going to be sporty at all. Volvo doesn't really want you sliding around, but for daily driving, I think that's going to be the one to keep your eye on. And we all know how the Tesla Model Y drives. It's a bit basic. I don't want to use the word utilitarian, but in the new cars, they've quieted down the boominess. They've softened the ride quality. They've chilled out the experience. And a Model Y is great, but you know you're not in an expensive car, if you know what I mean. Like it is quiet. It does the thing, and it's perfect for the price point. But the R2 needs to drive better than the Model Y. And that also comes down to accelerator pedal tuning, ESP inputs, overall vehicle dynamics on the limit do factor in here for me and many enthusiast drivers. The R2 needs to be a solid piece of engineering that can handle any weird thing out on the road. No more wheel lockups in regen mode like Rivian did when I first reviewed them. There is no excuses for any weird behavior from this car. It's got to be dialed. Rivian is competing against some of the largest and well-established automakers when it comes to driving dynamics. BMW, Mercedes, and Tesla should be roped into that category from powertrain control. They're not going up against Yugos. They're going up against the real big boys here and competing in that price category. They've got to get it dialed. Bringing it back down to earth a little bit, I don't want to spend too much time on the performance nerd driving stuff because we're going to learn a lot about that in the reviews from people this week. And we'll also have a reaction video on our Out of Spec Bits channel once we start reviewing and seeing all the reviews out there. I so wish I could get you a video on this car. I will do so as soon as possible because I'll give you all the nerd driving details on the R2. Interior space and cargo. This is hard to say. We don't know final cargo specs for really many of these cars, and many of them are rated not in the SAE cargo volumes. But I think from what I can gather is the Tesla Model Y pretty much has the most cargo volume because it's got a big trunk, a big underfloor storage. The seats fold flat. It's quite a tall roof, and it bubbles up in the middle, which is good, and also a pretty open front trunk. So that's going to be interesting to see when we put them back to back. All in all, they're all 5-seat electric vehicles. None of them offer 7 seats. They're all going to have enough room for your stuff. They all have front trunks. And ultimately, I don't think anyone's going to be making a buying decision over like 10 cubic feet difference. And I always have a really hard time visualizing like cubic feet of storage. To me, it's all about where are the cubbies located? Where can I put my stuff? And I think the R2 is going to be a very pleasant surprise in terms of the ability to put things in it. I sat in the second row of the R2 and was so impressed with the rear leg room. I sat in the front seats of the R2 and loved the double glove box. And just the vibe in the R2 felt happy and premium and great. And that was a pre-production prototype that I sat in over a year ago, but it was such a good vibe. And I get good vibes also from the EX60, from the Volvo. But even that just felt a little bit more, I don't know, a little bit more cramped in than the R2. The R2 just struck a great balance. But again, that was a pre-series prototype that probably didn't have all the safety gear in it. And so who knows ultimately until we reach the end of their media programs to how it will all hold up. But looking forward to it. In terms of towing capacity, we don't know everything. I'm just referencing some numbers here. The GLC electric should tow over 5,000 pounds. Model Y is going to be around 3,500 pounds. And yeah, anyway, we should see what the R2 can tow. That's going to be really kind of interesting. But the most important category here, I think, is the tech integration of everything. And this is where Rivian has a real chance to compete head-to-head with Tesla. I think it's fair to say Tesla provides their owners the best technology experience on the market. They have great route planning. Phone is a key that you can share with everyone. Great app access. And everything just works. The software is so well baked. You very rarely have issues with Tesla anymore, and they have that dialed in. So that's the Model Y, and it is a high benchmark. Rivian has done an amazing job with their technology in the R1, and I think a lot of that is going to transfer down to R2. They have great graphics, a great user interface for their screen. We've seen some tidbits of information about the new UI, the new look from CNBC and others, and it looks really friendly, really approachable, and really rich in terms of the content that you're able to adjust. I'm so excited to see this new R2 user interface and platform and test the route planning logic, the SOC estimated on arrival, the plug-in charge, the automatic preconditioning, the gaming systems, the list goes on and on. And Model Y really sets the benchmark in terms of the overall capability, but I think Rivian's a very close second, and within a short period of time might even be able to surpass Tesla if they really stay on the trajectory that they're on. I can think Tesla's main focus has really just been driver assistance, not really giving users that much more benefit in the car. They do have Grok integration now, which is really nice, and some other things, but Rivian's really catching up. The other brands, Mercedes, Volvo, and BMW, all seem a bit clustered, a bit confused, and a bit more unapproachable for the regular viewer or regular driver, I should say. So like the BMW probably has the most daunting system. And I did a whole deep dive with their lead UI UX designer, and it's an incredibly powerful system. It's for everything it can do. But that BMW panoramic vision system that goes across the front is beautiful. There's just so much deep, rich optimization and settings in that car that I really appreciate that. So if you're a nerd or if you're someone who likes technology, the BMW might actually be the car of choice, because to me, it had the most depth of stuff that you can do, but it's lacking dog mode, basic features like a camp mode or dog mode that Rivian will have and Tesla has. and no one else has in this lineup except for VinFast VF8, which should be a competitor. That's crazy. GLC EV, I thought, did the worst out of any of this. I hate, personally, the screen in the GLC. It's totally upright. It's totally reflective. It goes across the entire vehicle like one piece of glass with 3 screens below it. And I like MBUX, but I don't like the new system as much. And I really hate the user interface of it. It just feels a little bit graphics heavy, a little bit gaudy, a little bit too immature for a Mercedes, I thought. And it just didn't work for me. It can do a lot of things. It's very powerful. It seems to be pretty solid and pretty stable, but it was glitching out when I was testing it at an auto show. It seemed like it was lacking some processing power. I'll chalk it up to early pre-production stuff, but I was just not impressed with the Mercedes technology and infotainment, especially compared to the BMW. And then the EX60 kind of is trying to do the minimalist thing Tesla does with the big screen in the center, similar to Rivian, but also has a driver display in front of you, which the Rivian does. And it felt nice, but it felt like it had the least powerful amount of settings, like the least depth to it. So they've gone minimalist to the point where it's almost like, oh, Volvo, could you not just engineer in some extra settings, extra features? Like it just felt almost so basic to the point where they could do more, but they didn't. And some people will like that, I think. I just can't believe that for this segment of vehicle, which a lot of dog owners own these vehicles, that only Rivian and Tesla offer dog mode. To me, that's really crazy. And then we get into the real hot topic of 2025 and 2026, which is driver assistance. It's really Tesla or nothing here right now. There's only one vehicle in this comparison by the numbers that can actually just drive you point to point anywhere in the entire US with almost zero struggle, with almost zero problem. And that's the Tesla Model Y. When you subscribe to FSD, because you can no longer purchase it. And that price is $99 a month right now, but is subject to change. But that is such a life hack for anyone who hasn't driven. Like, just drive your commute on FSD. You got to do it on doing it. You got to live with it for like a day. If you go to a dealership and experience it, you're like, oh, that's cool, but I don't need that. But when you're trying to get stuff done, or you're trying to eat, or you're doing whatever, and you're just I'm in the car, you just take over the driving. You go, whoa, I've got a self-driving car, even though it's still a supervised system. It is genuinely life-changing. And that is the real USP or unique selling point of the Tesla Model Y. So many people will give up all of the benefits of the other cars, the charging, the quality, the interior space, the styling, the image, the perception, because they're genuinely getting not just good driver assistance, they're getting a self-driving car today, now, in their driveway, done, already finished. And you make sure it doesn't crash into a wall or do something stupid, but it's very, very rare. And the new software, a buddy of mine went over 12,000 miles without intervening one time. Not to say it was perfect, but it's possible. Another friend of mine, 2 of my friends, went across the country, filmed the whole thing, no interventions the whole way. It is such a dramatic shift. And I know some people don't want to hear about it because I just don't think they've experienced the newest one and how cool it is. But it is dramatic how the Tesla Model Y is that good. Now, the Rivian has all the hardware, at least Rivian claims, to do what Tesla is doing today. To do supervised level 2 point-to-point driving. And I went for a ride in Rivian's own developed architecture, own developed software, a very beta drive. And you could tell that, Rivian's working on this. They've got the bones for a really good system that will come with over-the-air software updates, that will come at a subscription per month, which is subject to change, of course. And so that's going to get better over time. But currently, they're not there. Currently, we have the latest and greatest in our Gen 2 R1S. It does lane centering with your hands off the wheel on most roads, pretty much every road except some real back roads it won't work on. But it's night and day to what Tesla's doing. It's not even close to FSD anything. It's just basic autopilot with a hands-free eye tracking function. It's way not even close. So I really hope Rivian is kicking it into high gear and trying to match what Tesla is doing there. The next best for driver assistance is actually the Mercedes, believe it or not. Right before I experienced the Rivian system, Mercedes invited me to San Francisco to drive with their NVIDIA-based level 2 point-to-point system. And I found it very comparable to where Rivian is today. It felt early. It felt like, certainly nowhere near FSD. It felt like it was doing some weird stuff. It was making lane changes without turn signals. It almost had some exciting moments in intersections. And I posted both of those videos, uncut, full raw video online, so you can watch both of them. But at least it's nice to know they're working on it. But NVIDIA's working on it in collaboration with Mercedes. But it just didn't feel like it was any farther ahead than where Rivian was today. And maybe that should speak volumes to that sort of battle happening in the ADAS space. But the GLC is capable of doing that level 2++ that the CLA is. So that's going to be coming, and it's going to be really cool. But Mercedes is going to be almost the safest about it all, which means you're going to have the least use of everything. And I agree, safety is very important when it comes to this stuff, but it's just hard as a Tesla owner to drive anything else without FSD for daily commuting. I understand many people love driving, including me. And so I think if you haven't experienced FSD, maybe just don't if you're buying the R2 and just stay locked in and don't just ignore that whole world, because once you kind of have it for a couple commutes or a couple drives, you're like, whoa, I'll take a real garbage can on wheels if it can drive itself versus anything nice. That is a real thing that's happening in the industry right now. And then the EX60 will probably have the worst driver assistance, just adaptive cruise control, basic lane centering on the highway, maybe back roads as well. And the iX3 is similar, highway driver assistance with basic lane centering. BMW says they're working on turning and stopping at stoplights, but they're not going to be anywhere near what Tesla or Rivian or Mercedes are going to be able to do in the ADAS space. So I think that's the real downside to the iX3 here, and the real, maybe only major competitive advantage to the Model Y, other than the price, is the FSD system. Off-road and towing capability, this is probably not as important for many people, but this is where R2 kind of separates itself from the pack, because it's going to have the most ground clearance out of all of those, except maybe the EX60 cross country, because that's going to have height adjustable air suspension. So will the GLC, I guess. But we're expecting, again, towing and off-road. We're expecting dual motors, open diffs from the Rivian. Same with everything else. Very light off-roading from all of these vehicles. But the Rivian does feel the most adventurous out of the bunch. And I think they do need to make it a bit more gravel road, rally capable, dirt road, fun than the rest of the competitive segment. That could really be, that has always been the Rivian's thing, is being super fun to go off-road and adventure and get out in the wilderness. And we know the R2 is not going to have the articulation or the air suspension and all of that, but we do know it should be able to handle mild desert crawling or desert riding out in the dunes and stuff. And I think that's going to be the most fun if you're looking to be adventurous. And many of my friends fall into the category of like that, late 20s, early 30s. They've got remote work. They all have Starlinks. They want to go camping on the weekends. And we know the R2 is going to have a camp mode to keep climbing on. And that's going to be the real unique selling point, I think, to the Rivian, is it's going to feel the most get out in the wild, go adventure, go do stuff. I don't really even see Volvo EX60 cross-country owners like going camping and being young and getting out there. That's more for like, I'm retired and I need to get to my summer cabin up a dirt road type vibe. iX3, GLC, Model Y, more on-road vehicles. Same with normal EX60. The R2, really the off-road or at least dirt road capability is going to, I think, win it over a ton of buyers in this category. And that's what I'm most excited about, is like, let's take it to the beach. Let's take it off-road. Let's go do stuff with it. And none of the other vehicles have that adventurous character that Rivian is really unique for having in the electric space. And I think that's going to help them sell a ton of R2s. I mentioned towing earlier on. I'll mention it again here. I'm expecting probably 5,000 pounds from R2. BMW iX3s, probably under 5,000. Mercedes is going to be right around there. EX60 is probably 4,500 and Model Y is 3,500 pounds. Surprisingly, the Porsche Macan EV was just re-rated. I think I can share this. Yeah, I can. To 5,500 pound towing on the little tiny Macan, which is like a hatchback. 5,500 pounds on that thing. So Porsche got that dialed in. That's freaking awesome. So yeah, I think Rivian's going to win the off-road category. That's going to be so fun. I can't wait to adventure with it and do the Moab tests versus Rivian R1 and all that. It's going to be super fun. And then we get to buying experience. This is really dependent on your local dealership, sales, and service model, but it is something you need to think about. Rivian probably has the least built out sales and service network in your region compared to, you could just basically drop a pin anywhere, and Rivian probably has the least built out sales and service compared to BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, and Tesla. Rivian's decided to go with a direct to consumer sales model, which I really appreciate as a consumer. I really don't love dealerships. Dealerships will argue they're there for the customer. I would argue they're there to squeeze every bit of money out of the customer. And I just feel better about buying a car directly from the manufacturer because at least at the time of purchase, you know that you're paying the same as everyone else. And Rivian thankfully offers an online buying experience. There's been a reservation list for R2. I made one as soon as possible, so I know we're super early. So stay tuned for maybe a future R2 coming. But I know that reservation list should hopefully be followed in order. They really didn't do that well with the R1. Let's hope they do it with R2. And I'll be able to purchase it directly from Rivian and pick it up, hopefully at a Rivian delivery center, which means I have to travel about an hour away from where I live to go do that. Tesla's the same way. Tesla has built out more sales and service centers than Rivian. They've had more time. They have more cars. They had more money to do it. And I think Tesla's really gone through the valley and the peak of offering a good and bad sales and service experience. We've all seen how hard it was for Tesla to scale, mostly service, how bad it got. And I feel like I'm seeing a little bit of that from Rivian owners. Now, I have not personally experienced that. I've had great service experiences with Rivian. I recently had a Rivian mobile service come up to the office here and replace a 12-volt battery on our 2026 R1S after we ran it dead. That was a great experience. But yeah, Tesla's got it dialed in now. I think Rivian's really got to stay on top of R2 service. I don't see how they're going to do it. I feel like Rivian service is kind of already at their maximum capability, just ahead of the launch of their most high volume product that they're going to launch. And so I'm a little bit, not even a little bit, I'm massively worried about how they're going to take care of customers with this. They did everything they could do with R1. I don't know if that same spirit is there within the company to like really take care of their customers. As an early R1 owner, I felt like, along with, I'm sure many other early R1 owners can mention this as well, or share this experience. You almost felt like, hey, thank you so much for taking the leap of faith for buying this first generation product, believing in us. We're going to take care of you. Like, we know we may not be perfect. It might take longer than expected, but we're going to take care of you because you are helping us build this company. Now with R2, it's more going to be like, oh, you're just a normal guy. You're a number. You bought an R2 for 45 grand or whatever, and back of the line, buddy, because service centers backed up. I don't know if that's going to be the case, but that's just my feeling, and I hope it's not true. BMW has a well built out service network of dealerships, but they have very few EV techs at their dealerships. And I've heard that to be a problem at pretty much any traditional brand. So I'll say the same for Mercedes, Volvo, and BMW. They really need to get used to working on electric, hybrid, and combustion cars all on the same service bench with all techs trained up on all models. It's hard. There's big turnover in the industry. But Tesla and Rivian certainly have the advantage of controlling that service experience, because not only is it manufacturer sold, it's manufacturer serviced. Whereas with the other models, it's dealer serviced. And I just always have bad experiences with dealer service. Something's always messed up. Something's always wrong. And I could say the same. I've had that experience with Tesla many times as well. And Rivian, to be fair. Nothing's perfect, but I just feel like service-wise, it comes down to, is your dealer great or is your dealer terrible? And that's a very localized decision you need to make. From a sales perspective, just my impression, Rivian's going to probably have a backlog of orders, probably not as big as everyone thinks based off reservations. Most reservations don't transfer into sales, of course. But I think you'll be able to get an R2 easily by year end. BMW iX3 is going to be a really hot car. Don't expect cheap leases. That probably, the first initial ones at the dealer will probably be sold, and inventory will be available, I think, in not much time after landing. That's just my guess. Mercedes GLC electric, I think you're going to be able to pick that car up as soon as they hit the port. You're going to find units that are unsold. It just has not seemed to capture the hearts and minds of the EV buyer base. And I think it's going to become a lease special inside of Mercedes very quickly. Unfortunately, Mercedes has just never done that great with their electric cars in our market. And they'll be the first ones to tell you that, not just me. The Volvo EX60, I think, is actually going to be hard to get. I think that's going to be a real hot seller for them. It's one of the most important cars for Volvo, if not the most. And I think globally, they're going to have a hard time making enough of those things. That car's really good. And they also don't build cars all that fast. Volvo's a small car company. And Model Y, you can go pick one up right now. Not hard at all. Just run down to the dealer, go grab one, or the showroom, buy it on your cell phone. Best buying experience ever. The whole car walks you through a tutorial on how to use it. You don't even have to talk to anyone, and you just drive away. I love the Tesla buying experience. I just went through it the other day when we got Sam's Model 3. Went in there, signed one piece of paper because it's North Carolina. They needed a wedding signature. Handed us the key cards. 2 wheels were scratched. They'll come up and replace them later. Actually, they didn't. I've got to ask them about that now that I'm remembering. But anyway, car walked us through everything. We were good to go. Off we went. It was amazing. And then we get down to warranty and ownership costs. And it really comes down to most of these cars, BMW, Mercedes, Volvo, and Tesla have a 4-year, 50,000 mile warranty on their car, basic warranty. And that's very, very common. Rivian might have a 5-year, 60,000 mile warranty on R2. It could be 450. I don't think it's been announced yet. But I think Rivian, at least with R1, really came out with a strong warranty. 175,000 mile, 8-year battery and powertrain warranty on the R1 product, the launch product. That was a great way to instill confidence in me as an early buyer. And I really hope with R2 they give it a juicy warranty as well, because I think that's a real key safety net for someone buying a unproven product from a new company that everything's not even related to the R1. It's all new. It was developed in a rush timeline. You just hope they got it right. And you want to make sure that the company is going to back the car if they didn't get it right. And so I think Rivian's going to actually have the best warranty out of everyone here. Tesla has an 8-year, 120,000 mile warranty on long range Model Y and 4-year 50 on the car. So that should be pretty cool. So that's really R2 versus everything. I think even though the BMW, the Volvo, and the Mercedes all charge way faster and go way farther, especially in the case of the Volvo and the BMW, most people seem to care less and less about charging performance and range and numbers on paper, because a Rivian's going to be able to do everything you need it to do. You're going to charge at home most of the time. It's going to have more than enough range to get your daily driving done. And when you go on that occasional road trip, you're not cannonballing. You're not trying to make the fastest time possible. If you're a heavy business traveler or you just love to have fast charging, then unfortunately the Rivian does not offer that long range fast charging that the others do. But I think that's going to be less and less important as we settle in on what's enough for most people. There's got to be a ceiling at some point for when people stop caring. And I think we're getting close to that, where everything's good enough. You can get around. There's so much charging installed in our market in the US now where it matters less and less. So I think we're getting there. And I think that's going to help R2 a lot, because at least when you look at the R2 in the comparison to these, it looks like it could be very similarly priced to its to its nicer brands, BMW, Volvo, and Mercedes and their products. Those are more luxury products versus the R2, which is a bit more mainstream. But those cars certainly seem to be similar in cost and way better in performance on paper. Even with all of that said, most of our viewers, including me, feel the emotional draw to the R2, that adventurous spirit, the kind of cute look of the front of it, and the way that it is just capturing the hearts and minds of people, I think is really impressive. And that goes a lot to Rivian's branding and marketing, which does work and plays a big role. It's premium. It's not pretentious, which I always keep saying, and it's just the right image. Now, I wish it would charge faster, and I wish it had, maybe a little bit more range. Mostly care about the high voltage and charging. And I really can't wait to see how they tune the ride and driving dynamics, because that's a real make or break for me. But that's really it. So as you watch the upcoming R2 reviews and as you watch a lot more content coming from your favorite content creators and outlets out there, keep this in mind. Keep the comparisons in mind. I know it's a long video, but I hope you learned something. And I hope I was able to share my input on all of these 10 major topics. So that's R2 versus Model Y, GLC, EX60, and iX3. Super fun time. Thanks for watching. We'll see you in another one again soon. Bye-bye.